KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan Moriarty. Dagan, I have nothing, to call you today because I feel like we don't really have a topic that I can grab from. Right, okay. This is a more amorphous topic. I don't know what to say. I mean, about this. So it's
something
just you
has finally rendered Colin Moriarty speechless.
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about it, and I'm like, what can you say? That's not just. You don't want to just say something to say something. You want to have it mean something. Otherwise, it's just a needless tradition. Right?
I understand what you're saying. I was thinking more of like I'm going to start doing a thing where this would only be applicable to our watchers, not our listeners, but I was just going to be doing something while you talked, and then after you made the introduction, say, "Oh, hi," like you just dropped in.
You got to do like the newscast. The newscaster. This will only be good for our video listeners, or viewers. But the newscast like commercials where they're like,
they've been keeping up that same charade for decades. Or we could do the sitcom thing where it's like, it's like they do the deadpan like.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like the Too Many Cooks intro that from 5, 6, 7 years ago. That was like 12 minutes of that. That was awesome. Very similar to that.
Funny. Yes, it's been done. It's been done. Got to think of something more creative. How are you doing today? What's going on with you?
I'm good. I have to say, well, first of all, welcome everyone to KnockBack. And
hello,
I have to say, I tried something last night that I hadn't done ever really, and it was a bit of a challenge, but I guess it's no big deal. But I tried to I went to bed last night. I went up. Mike and I usually go up around 11 or 11:30.
That's not too late. Okay. That's
no. And then but I'm up for hours. Sometimes after that. But what I did was I left my phone downstairs, and I actually went and bought an alarm clock, just like a digital clock, just so I can see what time it is. And I still have my PS5, my TV, which is connected to the PS5, and then I have books, which is what I'm trying to. I haven't really been reading and stuff, so. I feel like I just check this thing all the time for no reason. Okay. Like there's like, what do I need to be on this for all the time? Not during your day when you're reading things and stuff, but at night. I feel like it's. No. I explained it on our Discord, and of course, if you join us on Patreon and support us there, you can gain access to the Discord, patreon.com/laststandmedia, early access to the show, etc. You know the drill by now, but I was reflecting over there that. I think the difficulty with the internet and with smartphones is that there's no end. I used to be comfortable saying like this movie's over, this TV show's over, whatever, but there's just no end to the Twitter feed. There's just no end to Wikipedia. There's just no end. And I feel like it was also keeping me up. Like there were a few times where I would get up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night and come back to bed and not just go on my phone for no reason.
Okay.
Right. Right. Just to be like, oh, what's going on in the world? So I went upstairs at like 11 and I came downstairs at like 10 today. And so I went that time without knowing what was really going on in the world. And it was kind of nice. And I'm trying to distance myself from things more and more. I had explained on Sacred Symbols, I think that, I've basically stopped using Twitter because I found it to be, I still promote our stuff there, but otherwise I don't really I read my feed, but I don't read my mentions and I don't get involved in anything anymore. Because I found it to be like way too parasocial and destructive. Okay. And I've been doing that for like almost a month now, and it feels great. Like I'm definitely not going to go back unless they really start managing Twitter differently. So I'm trying to find out different ways that I can decouple myself from just technology and just feeling like I always need to have my finger on the pulse or feel like I always just need to have access. And it reminded me, I wanted to bring it up on the show because the show is all about nostalgia, and it's a nostalgic feeling of being worried, of being bored when I was a kid. And we've said on the show in the past that I find boredom impossible, especially in the modern era. I just don't understand being bored. Yet I have this fear of being bored. And it reminds me of being a kid where if the internet was down, or earlier than that, if you didn't have TV or like you didn't have access to things, you were just kind of hamstrung. And for some reason, I have this real feeling where I'm like, I got to combat that actively. But in reality, we don't live in that world anymore. And so it's incumbent upon me to, in turn, get away from it because it used to get away from you. And that's not the way it is anymore. So
No, it's true.
that was kind of my philosophical, pensive scenario that I was living through today. And what's funny was that when I went upstairs yesterday, I was like, oh, I'm not going to do it yet. And I left my phone downstairs on accident. And then I was like, oh, I'll just leave it. And we'll just, just cold turkey.
And how did that go? How did it went fine?
I read for a little while and then I just fell asleep. It was great. Yeah,
there you go.
Now, who knows how it will go in the future, but that's the intent.
I like it. I mean, I like that dedication to unplugging. I think it's healthy. I do think you're right. Like the social media, the constant feed, like the no end, no beginning and no end sort of thing, the nature of it. Yeah, it just kind of plays into anxiety and some sort of pressure, right? Even, especially someone I could imagine with your social media presence, your following. You have a big following. You're a little bit of a social media celeb. So I can understand that for sure. I think, yeah, we could take a page out of that. As a parent, we're always trying to limit our kids on social media and games and unplugging and decompressing, going outside, like go look out into the distance instead of looking 2 feet in front of your face, that type of thing. Just take a page out of that for ourselves as adults and just do that kind of thing too. Because even the nature of our work, right? Like I work all day. I'm referencing things on Google. We're having discussions. I'm on constant Zoom calls. It's a very social thing, even with the COVID, even with the nature of COVID and not working in the same physical, location as your coworkers and colleagues and stuff. So yeah, man, I could totally understand that for sure.
Yeah,
I commend you for that. And now that you mentioned it, I noticed it. I noticed that you've been a little bit less and less with every day, like a little less from Colin. Like you said, you're still promoting all the LSM stuff. But
yeah, I don't think I've tweeted about like myself because I basically had kind of just a break with it where I was just like, I can't. It really is. It's a term that was brought to my attention a few years ago, but this parasocial kind of thing online where it's not. I think people get it confused, and I don't want to conflate issues. I don't care that people don't like me. That's its own thing, right? I can't control that. There's nothing I can do about that. I also don't mind. I mean, it's not nice, but I don't mind that people talk shit about me or to me. That's also its own thing, and it's not what bothers me. What bothers me is that people talk to me like they know me. And I know that's a difficult thing to hear sometimes, but you don't know me. And you shouldn't be comfortable saying and doing certain things to or around me. I'm sorry. Right. And so like what came to head for me was that I was congratulating a friend of mine who's a controversial person in politics about this big entrepreneurial deal he did.
Sure.
And people just wanted to get in there and just insult him and insult me and insult our relationships. And I'm like, you don't fucking know me. You don't know him. You don't know the nature of our relationship. And the only way I can combat this is to be like, I'm just not going to post about anything anymore.
I think that's really
that's
healthy.
over,
that's very healthy.
I'm on Discord. Again, we have Discord. We have thousands of people on our Discord. You have to be part of our Patreon to join it, but it keeps out the riffraff. And frankly, even when the riffraff isn't kept out, Dustin and I have talked, we've removed people from our own paying, not many, once in a while, like once in a blue moon, but you can't, because some people think that they can pay and then insult you or try to get involved, right? And it's like, no.
Get up here in front of that paywall, then you could do your thing.
So, yeah, I feel like I had to be more proactive, and I'm feeling like I'm just trying to take... I really am an action-oriented person, even though I'm pretty passive and whatever in my life. Like, I understand that I have to keep things in motion. There's always something in motion in my life because I don't like static. Time wasted is just time wasted, right? Like there's a million things that are being done around the house, the pool, and blah 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 blah. And it's like I always have to have something in play, so I know something's going on. This just takes something out of play for me. Like it lessens my anxiety because when you tweet something or put something out there, it's so annoying because people are so pedantic. Where it's like you can say anything and there's gonna be someone being like, actually, and so
absolutely.
And to me, I'm just like, nah. At this point, I find it a useful RSS feed to engage with. I read it.
Right.
I don't go into my mentions. I don't really have any mentions anymore because no one really tweets at me.
Yeah.
And then I just tweet out our content. And I've said before too that I do feel like Twitter is a good way to let people know you're still alive, but tweeting our content doesn't really mean anything either. Like, no, we don't get almost any traffic from that. So that's just a thing to remind people that are there that, hey, maybe there's something interesting here. But what I've realized, Dagan, is that I listen to so many people that don't engage in social media or don't engage much in social media, the Sam Harrises and the Lex Friedmans and stuff, where you hear from them once in a while, but they're not like everyday doom scrolling on Twitter. And you realize that these people just do their own things and find their audiences naturally, and you don't need to engage in this active way. And I think that was something I was also worried about. And removing myself for the last month or so has not had any real negative effect or
No
drag
negative
on anything.
effect.
So
That's all. I mean, that's awesome to hear. And I think it's really healthy what you're doing. Somebody of your station. It's interesting the way the nature of celebrity has changed with social media, because I think it has removed barriers, at least it's perceived that it's removed barriers. So people do feel like they know you, for instance, right? Just because they listen to your content or they've listened to you for a decade or so on your from IGN to Kind of Funny to now, like they feel like they know you, and then they feel like they could be, you feel familiar. You know what I mean? So it's almost like, would they do that with a Johnny Depp? Would they do that with a, whoever else, whatever other uber celebrity there is? So yeah, I think there's some level where it's perceived like social media celebrity seems like more accessible, even though it really isn't. You know what I mean? Even though we, and also like we interact with our audience too, we build that into the content and all of that. But yeah, maybe it's just the fact of people remembering. Most people do, but that smaller percentage of people remembering to abide by a certain set of manners, or you know what I mean? Like we're not neighbors, we're not friends, we didn't grow up together, we probably never physically met face to face. And maybe that gets lost in the shuffle for some people. Maybe it's younger people. I don't know. But it's not, we know that it's not just younger people from some of the toxic things that you have dealt with. It is adults.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Least.
Like, it's just, it's no insult to anyone.
Sure.
It's just, I love like casual interactions, meeting people, shaking hands, taking pictures, whatever we do when we're out and about. But I realize that there's just always, I have to remove, I can't be normal. I've just kind of realized that it's not like I can't walk or no one knows who I am in person. I'm saying there are certain places that you just can't be normal if you're known, and I just can't interact with the world in a normal way.
Yeah.
On social media. So I just choose not to do that anymore.
I think it's smart, dude.
And it's been good. So anyway, that connects to me going phoneless and then trying to, just try to get reconnected with a sort of more analog lifestyle.
You're going off the grid. Give it like 3 more months, you'll be like in Wisconsin, some cabin.
I couldn't imagine. I would say if satellite internet was good, it's not. But if they get to a place where satellite internet was good, I would love to live off the grid, because, and not literally off the grid, but just be like, I'm just living in the middle of nowhere, and all I would need, really all you need is great internet, and you'll have everything. Like that's all you need.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
Like and you could even have solar panels and well water and stuff. So all you would need is like to draw satellite internet, but it's just not very good. So
I hear you on that. Why did I say Wisconsin? I meant Wyoming. Sorry, Wisconsiners. Milwaukeeers.
Milwaukee. So Dig, anything to discuss before we go into our business here?
No, I was just getting aggravated this morning. I don't even know what dredged it up for me, because it's something that happened last week. Just very brief.
Please.
I called a pizza place, to order dinner. This was last week sometime. Now, right. I'm thinking about averages. We've lived here for 10 years. So we've been basically customers of this pizza joint for the better part of a decade. And probably like what? In all fairness, probably purchase food from them like twice a month, right? So first of all, in New York, you know how that is. Normally, Long Island, the 5 boroughs, Manhattan, whatever, like you build a rapport with the people that work there, maybe the owner. After a while, there's a certain amount of time that builds up, and then there's a familiarity, and then people say, hi, how you doing? How's the family? How's the wife? You at least acknowledge that you recognize each other.
Right.
Least,
of course.
Never happened at this place, which aggravates the shit out of me, because I know you know who I am, because I've been coming here since I was 37 years old, 10 years ago, and I've been coming frequently. It's not like I pop in, I pop in once a year. So that's a whole nother thing. So I called them last week, and I'm ordering my food. And in that list of items, I say, one of the usual things I order for Helene and I, we share it. I say, give me a chicken parm sandwich, extra cheese, extra sauce. Oh, I'm sorry. I said, let me have a chicken parm hero. Okay. The New York came out. Give me a chicken parm hero, extra cheese, extra sauce. Young girl on the phone. She goes, I hear there's like a brief beat, a pause, and she says, "You want a chicken parm sandwich?" Now, if she knew what I meant, she couldn't just let it go. She couldn't just go with the hero thing. She was
Maybe,
basically what she was telling me was we don't say that here, type of thing.
but could it be that she thought? See, this is the problem when I moved to Boston that I found about the word hero.
Okay.
It's not just, and this, I'm not letting her off the hook because it's probably not true, but it could be a possibility. Is that when you say that word in some Greek or Mediterranean restaurant, what do they think?
I
Gyro,
understand. Now you're going
which
with the
we
gyro
call
thing.
gyros, right?
Yes.
Now,
Okay.
this is a thing that's surprising to people. This is just like the no mustard on McDonald's and Burger King burgers on Long Island in New York City. It's true.
It's true.
There
It's
is no
totally
mustard
true.
on those burgers, right? Okay, so
Totally
that's true. Now,
100%.
another, so these are various, just I think local differences. Obviously, the way we call sandwiches, but I did have a situation where I just remember because I was in Boston, University House of Pizza on Huntington Avenue, and I asked for a gyro or a hero, and they were like, a gyro, and I was like, a gyro, and they were like, no, it's gyro, and I'm like, I'm saying hero, and they're like, you just want like a grinder, right? And I'm like,
So it gets a little confusing,
right? So but Boston's pizza parlors are very Greek. Now, I'm not giving the people in Philadelphia and the Philadelphia suburbs an excuse because they might not have the same excuse.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that word can be a little bit of a mine in, on
I didn't
the ground.
think of that. You're definitely giving her a caveat right now. And you know what? In all fairness, in urban Philadelphia, the pizza places also, not all, but a lot of them do tend also to be Greek, which is something we weren't used to because on Long Island, it's the diners that are Greek.
Right. The pizza parlors are not Greek.
Pizza parlors are typically not Greek in New York, where we're from. Definitely. So, but I just felt like it was a provincial thing. Like she was saying, like, use the proper provincial parlance.
Good use of the good alliteration. Wow, look at you, provincial.
Look at that alliteration. Holy,
I know. I was going to say, my goodness. All right, well,
Jesus, that was completely it. That was
unexpected.
But I just felt like her attitude, and also it's the type of thing too where this girl will do the thing. This aggravates the shit out of me too. Is she'll on a busy, I usually you order pizza on a busy Friday, Saturday. I understand they're busy, but she'll do the thing. Have you experienced this where it's like Randazzo's Pizza? I just called you out, but sorry, Randazzo's Pizza. Please hold. And like before you can say okay, it's just like that's it. They're gone, right? Then they usually come back. It's 2 minutes. You're already aggravated.
Right.
Then you get the hero spiel.
Right.
It's
right.
like,
wow, you're really amped up right now.
I feel like
maybe it's time to go to a
she
different
was
pizza
saying
place.
was, please say it the way we say it. And then I'm just thinking in my head, like, you're probably 19. I've been in Philly since I was 20. So I've been here for 27 years. So that makes me much more of a Philadelphian than you are at your tender young age.
Sure.
Number one. Number two is this is a region known for a sandwich, right? You got the Philly cheesesteak. Let there be a little play in the sandwich terminology. I know you do the hoagie thing. I know the hoagie thing is typically a cold sandwich. I get it. And I'm down. But if I say hero, New York is 75 miles from here. I didn't come from Mars or the moon. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, like you're our neighboring city. Like you could accept hero. And what did I mean? Like it's not a Greek. Listen, it's not a Greek pizzeria. It's an Italian pizzeria. I know the owner. What did she think I meant? Extra cheese and extra sauce on the back of like a caped superhero? Like I meant to say, well, it's a hero. How do you not know? So and maybe they don't. I mean, maybe they don't, right? We don't say pop. And upstate New York is really close to here, so
if someone said pop to me, I'd be like, okay. I mean, you're fucking crazy that you say that, but I understand what you mean.
And the pop thing is weird too, because it's like Rhode Island, and then it skips over some places, and then it's like upstate New York, and then it skips out to like Wisconsin. It's very strange. And then also, I'll give you guys a little foreshadowing for a future conversation. We'll get into, because I don't think we've ever talked about this on the show, the very aggravating war that has been brewing for decades over, is it sprinkles or Jimmy's? New York with their sprinkles and Philadelphia with their Jimmy's.
Yeah.
Which is just,
Jimmy's
and people get amped up. People get upset.
Jimmy's is abhorrent. That's an abhorrent term. We don't need to call sprinkles that.
We'll get into this conversation. I have something to say about this, but for now, we should probably roll into the topic.
Yeah, I
du
know
jour.
we have some sort of time constraint today, although I don't think we're even going to have to worry about it. We'll see what happens. But
We're fine.
I had this idea. People like these one-off topics that we do. And I had this idea because we don't do enough about music, and I think we can revisit music much more because we're both huge music fans. So I'm trying to think more about like, well, what could be an interesting thing that's outside of our favorite albums and all of that, and favorite songs, bands, which we've done and we'll continue to do stuff like that. So what I thought about was what if each of us selected 5 songs that just reminded us of a place or an event or a time, and explain why and what the song is and why that song is associated with the time in question or the event in question or the person or place or whatever in question. And what I think is interesting too is that I don't even know if I'm interpreting some of these songs correctly in terms of the intention of the song and what they're trying to say. Sometimes it doesn't even matter. I have a pretty narrow view of how I look at this topic. I'd like to make it broader as we do it in the future.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know. How does this topic idea strike you? Just kind of dredging up some, pardon the pun, there are no dredge songs in here, but pardon the pun. We're dredging up the, songs from the past that bring us to a place or remind us of something. I don't know. I like this idea. And as I was scrolling through my playlist, because as everyone knows, as I've said many a time, my playlist on Spotify is just one playlist. It's just every song that I've ever wanted to listen to is in one playlist.
Cohesive. Wow.
And it's completely
How many
schizophrenic.
tracks are on there? Do you know?
God, a lot. Let me see.
Thousands?
Many thousands. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, thousands. Yeah.
That's incredible.
So I was just scrolling through it and things popped out to me. Now, I think I could scroll through it over and over and over again and then come up with like 50 more answers. So I'm not saying that these are 5 songs. I want to be clear, at least in my interpretation. These are not 5 songs that I have the 5 greatest stories about, or the 5 most poignant moments in my life. I don't even think I can talk about some of those songs and some of those moments and some of those events. But because it involves other people too intimately, and I don't mean in good ways, I mean sometimes in bad ways. So I just grabbed these songs that I think represent a swath of things that have happened, and we can talk about them. Now I'm going to throw it over to you because I want you to go first. But how did you interpret this assignment? Did you interpret it similarly to the way I did?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're on the same wavelength with that. I was really excited when you brought this one up because it's a fun one, and it's automatically not your favorite albums, not necessarily your favorite songs, but like those songs that transport you back in time, like you said, to a certain time, a certain place, certain memories. And so, at its core, these are songs that are nostalgic for us. And what was interesting, Kyle? I thought it would be hard when I sat down to just jot down which songs maybe come to mind. And 7 songs came right into my head, like almost immediately. And they're all at different ages. And of course, 2 of them were relegated now to honorable mentions. And I chose the core 5. But it wasn't like a narrowing down or a vetting process at all. It was just like, it's these specific things, which are all very specific. And I hope mostly fun memories. And then, of course, I did what you did too, like those songs that were maybe a little more bittersweet or reminded you of some unfortunate memories, ex-girlfriends, or things that happened in the family that were more like sour experiences, I would say. But for me, just for pure nostalgia, it almost popped right into my head, which was really interesting, especially now where I just think I need like ginkgo, but my memory seems to be slipping a little bit in my old age.
Ginkgo biloba. You don't hear too much about ginkgo biloba
I know. What happened to ginkgo? It was very 90s, I feel like.
Everyone was taking. Remember Dad used to take like he used to go into Chinatown and get those like weird extracts.
The little tinctures.
Yeah, and he would just fucking shoot those things.
He may still do that, actually.
I don't know what the hell his Dad is just a man of stories and mystery. He's an enigma in so many ways. I don't know what that was all about. But anyway, Dagan, I want you to kick us off with the first of 5 songs. We've narrowed it down just to keep things, moving.
Just keep it moving.
Moving. By the way, total non sequitur. Before we get into this, though, what have you been thinking about some of the Sopranos memes I've been sending you? But they're like Sopranos and other. So I sent you a Kodak conversation of
the Metal Gear one yesterday.
Yeah.
Where are those from? Are you making those?
No. Oh my God, no, I'm not making them.
Oh, okay,
there are meme geniuses. So I always say that memes are like take a penny, leave a penny tray.
Yeah.
And I do make a meme and throw it in there. I don't sign it. I don't do anything about it. And I've seen them circulate, right? So there's some memes out there that are pretty popular that are mine.
Yeah.
But 99% of the time I take them from someone else.
Okay.
That's the way it
But
goes.
I like the give and take.
Yeah.
That's very nice. Yeah, and that one actually hit close to home, the one you sent yesterday, because I was in the supermarket parking lot walking from my car to the store, and it made me laugh. And I'm watching The Sopranos again, and we just got through with Metal Gear Solid 3. Go watch, you bastards. Sorry about
Man, some
that.
people are upset about that episode, I'll tell you.
Yeah, why?
Metal Gear fans just... Oh, no, I don't want to say upset. Metal Gear fans, let's be honest, Metal Gear fans are annoying, right? They're just... there are just annoying fan bases. Dark Souls fans are annoying. There's just certain fan bases that are annoying, and they're one of them now. I just didn't really know it until we did those 2 episodes, but I know it for sure now.
Now you know.
Yeah,
proof positive.
They're in there. You know? Anyway, Dick, hit me with your first song here. Let's
all right.
go back.
So my first track, I was excited to share this one with you, and actually my second, I think mine go in order. My 5 songs, and the first 2 were from before you were born. So I thought this would be particularly fun to share. Now, song number 1, a classic, Fleetwood Mac, Dreams. Okay, and you may already know where I'm going with this, Kyle. This song, an iconic song, it was fun to do a little bit of research about this, off of Fleetwood Mac's 1977 album, Rumors, which was their 11th studio album already in 1977. Like, Fleetwood Mac was around a long time.
Yeah.
Makes me feel young.
People were putting records out like crazy back then, man. It almost makes you...
Like yearly.
There could be money made there. Yeah, even in the 90s, like 311 was putting out a record every year, pretty much.
That's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but you could just tell how much things have changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that regard. That anyway. So yeah, great pull. I love Fleetwood Mac.
This is a great one, and I didn't even I knew Fleetwood Mac's iconic rock band, legendary, one of the most important. This track in particular, and many songs, but I didn't know that this is often cited as one of the greatest albums of all time. And I think last year, Rolling Stone ranked Rumors number 7 out of the top 500 albums of all time, which is pretty crazy. The reason why this song is so memorable for me is because Mom and Dad played it a lot growing up in our house. This album, Fleetwood Mac specifically, and a couple other bands, were really the soundtrack to the Moriarty household in the mid to late 70s and into the early to mid 80s. And Mom and Dad, the interesting thing about this was Mom had her music that I found out very early on, very specific taste in music, right? She would play music out loud. Mom was a stay-at-home mom until I was 16 years old. So this was kind of the thing, they had the beautiful Pioneer record player in the living room. So to set the scene, this was the room where we weren't really allowed unless there was company. White furniture, white couch, white love seat, glass coffee table, glass end tables, and like Mom's sort of the decorations that were maybe a little more expensive, the Fabergé egg, the little marble tchotchkes, whatever. That was in the room. We weren't really allowed in there unless we were listening to music. And then in that case, we would get like the Frosty the Snowman soundtrack, and we had the giant headphones that we would plug it into the stereo. We would lay in there and listen and look at the record sleeve or whatever. But she would listen to music while she was cleaning, while she was cooking, while she was preparing for guests to come over for the holidays. And so she would have things on Mom's rotation would be like Christopher Cross, the Bee Gees, the Beatles, right? All that kind of stuff. And if Dad was listening to music in the house, let's say he was listening to music down the basement, or maybe he was even listening to music on the stereo while he was helping Mom get food ready or whatever, he would be, the things in his rotation that I remember the most would be like Sabbath, Zeppelin, maybe Frank Zappa, right? But this album, Fleetwood Mac specifically, this album even more specifically, and this track were like a common bond for them. This was like their combo favorite. They both love Fleetwood Mac. And I remember them sort of digging it, like singing it together while they were going about their business. And it really, I feel like it's crazy because if you date this song to when it came out, when the record came out, I could have been as early as 3 years old, all the way up until maybe 7. So, and it could have been that entire time because I think they tended to listen to the same music year after year. Like they just had their old standbys, their old go-tos and their favorites. And this was the major one. Like I could definitely see in my mind's eye, like mom with the Windex and the lemon pledge, cleaning the house, cleaning the dining room that was across from the living room and dancing around. And the same thing with dad. Like he really enjoyed this album too, even down to like the specific, you guys could go look at the album art, like the illustration on the cover. Very, very iconic, very, very nostalgic memory for me. And even more so, like there were other songs in their Fleetwood Mac rotation. We think of iconic songs. Don't Stop. Go Your Own Way was another huge one. You Make Loving Fun, whatever. And I have old favorites for Fleetwood Mac. Like I love Gypsy. I love Everywhere. Sarah. I love the specific tracks that are like among some of my favorite songs. But Dreams is the one that pops into my head because that's the one I remember that maybe was even on like a song after song rotation. Like, oh, play that again. Like they would play it 2 or 3 times in a row. They really loved it. So that was the number one thing. And I was thinking too, like, wow, Colin wasn't even alive for this. So I wonder if it's interesting for him to hear what the house sounded like before he was born, because by 1984, they were probably, I don't know what would have been on the rotation by then, but it probably wouldn't even have been vinyl.
Mom and dad were listening to Devo 1984. No, I wish.
Synth wave.
Yeah, that's just me now. Just getting fucking
exactly.
Dude, I get so amped up when Devo comes on. Oh my god! especially the song "That's Good." I love that song. That song.
I don't think I know it.
Rules.
I have to check that out.
Pre-Whip It, I think. Yeah, you'll like that one. That's
okay. Yeah. So you're dating back with that one.
Yeah, Whip It, I think is 82 or 83. I want to say this
Aunt
is
Joni was the Devo one in the house. I remember her rocking Devo.
Yeah, they're great. All right, Dig, the first song I wanted to talk about is actually the song that I most recently kind of added to my repertoire, but had known about for a really long time, and I thought that was interesting. So in college, I became aware of a band called Head Automatica. I don't know if you've ever heard of them or know them.
No.
They existed for a brief time, and they're interesting because I think the guy's name is Daryl Palumbo. He is the singer of Glassjaw, which is a famous Long Island hardcore band. And he started this more alt-rock band called Head Automatica, and they put out 2 records. And I became aware of them because in the student center at Northeastern, there used to be like this massive table of like brochures and stuff, and people that used to be on street teams. I don't even know if that's a thing anymore, but people that used to be on what were called street teams for bands and acts and stuff, record labels, where they would go hand things out, hand free albums out, hand posters out, like kind of more boutique-ish shit to try to get your attention, not just whatever, a monochrome flyer or whatever. And so we had a venue at Northeastern where people used to come play called After Hours. And so there was like people that used to go and walk through the student center to go there. And so they had all this street team shit there. Anyway, I used to go and steal these take these like 12-inch really nice pictures that they used to put of the album art. And they just constantly did this. And I did this for like all sorts of different records. And I became aware of Head Automatica through one of those. Their first album was called Decadence, and I had one of those, and I hung it on my wall, and I never even listened to it, until later in college. And I really liked it. And I hadn't really thought about them very much because bands find a way to stay together, but Head Automatica didn't. It wasn't, this guy's main project. I actually have seen Glassjaw since Head Automatica broke up. So, obviously Glassjaw is still moving on, but Micah is into them, and she had brought this song to my attention that I was like, oh my God, I love this song. I hadn't heard this song. It was one of those things where I was like, I forgot this song existed. And it was it was so fun. It's a song from their second and last album, Propaganda, called Platypus. And when I was like, oh, this is a great song. And I thought it was an interesting connection because sometimes songs enter your repertoire or your head in some specific way, and then they become meaningful later, or you only understand what the song is saying a certain time. We were talking recently just for fun about the song Pina Colada and how deep that song actually is, and how it's about like cheating on your spouse and stuff like that. And it's awesome. It's an awesome song. And right. And I've heard that song a million times and I never thought about it. So it was cool to hear this song. We were, I think, going on a road trip or whatever. Actually, no. Yeah. We were road tripping to go see Dustin for the show we all met at in Pittsburgh, or outside of Pittsburgh. And so I was like, oh, this song's cool. And then so it kept coming up on my playlist. My playlist is trended algorithmically, I think, to just play the things that are more newly added more often. That makes sense.
Oh, that's
so the song,
cool.
So as I'm working out, the song keeps coming up, and then I start listening to it. And I realized that it kind of encapsulated my experience in, if I'm interpreting, the way I'm interpreting it. I should be clear that I don't know if any of these songs are interpreted right or not. I don't like reading about song interpretations usually because it ruins how I interpret them.
I think that's art. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And like genius.com, which is an awesome website, really gets into like what songs mean and the individual lines. It's especially good for rap if you don't know the nomenclature of some
that's
songs.
Cool.
But generally speaking, I try not to research that stuff. So who knows if I'm interpreting it right. But I started listening to this song, and people might remember, I mean, 2019 into 2020 was like the pretty dark period in my life. I would say 2009, all of 2019 into the first 4 or 5 months of 2020 was really bad for me personally.
I remember.
And I heard this song, and it was actually the back end of the song that made me listen to it first. And then because there's like this refrain at the end in which he says, I'm telling you, I'm glad I'm alive and there's no way I'm touching ground again, which is the chorus. But the at the refrain, he says, I've been shot in the back by my fears over and over and over again. But the way I interpret the verses is about a person who gets out of something really toxic and unhealthy, and feels the great relief of knowing that it was up to me to extricate myself from these situations or from this situation, and to not go back to that situation, to acknowledge where one has been, and where one goes. And there's this amazing line in the second verse. This is amazing writing to me. He says, I saw a blind man shackled up by his hands and feet, escaping when his face hit the concrete. And the same way you play vicious, well, that's the same way you agree. Endearing and endearing empathy. It's an amazing line that, if I'm interpreting it right, is about like is like almost blacking out to pain and realizing that certain people or situations are putting you in those situations where the only way to get out of it is to pretend it doesn't exist, or to go into a shell, or whatever the case might be. And then you find yourself kind of making excuses for those situations. I think that this song says a lot with a few words. Now, I don't know if I'm interpreting him right at all, but it's certainly what it meant to me. And I thought it was an interesting song to start with, because I have known about this song for so long, hadn't heard it in years, never even thought about Head Automatica since I left Northeastern probably. And then it pops back up. Then I hear it. Then I'm like, oh, this song that I've heard and known all along is actually an interesting thing that was set into motion a long time ago. I mean, that's what I think is so funny about songs, just about interpretations of songs, is that they're set into play and set into motion at a certain time, and then they just go along the timeline until they intercept you, and then it's what they mean to you at that place and time that matters.
You're right.
So I really highly recommend this song by Head Automatica called Platypus. And I'm telling you, I'm glad I'm alive and there's no way I'm touching ground again, as he says. And I can relate. So yeah, that's my first song.
Super cool, man. I think you're going to put this one on a lot of people's radar. This isn't a common song.
No, not at all. I sent you were you able to listen to any of these songs? I did send you a list.
No, you sent me the playlist. I wasn't able to listen to
them. Yeah, you should. That's the one song I think you might be interested in the sound. It's not like Glassjaw where it's hardcore. It's just alt rock. It's very, very listenable. I mean, it's a really good song.
And you've always been drawn to very poetic, well-written lyrics. You've always been an appreciator of that, I feel like, which is cool. Really speaks to your tastes. Yeah, I'm going to listen to your entire playlist when I work tonight, actually, especially the ones that I haven't heard yet. I do remember one more on your list, but I tried not even to look. I was like, I don't know if I want to spoil it. All right, so you ready for number 2?
Yeah, what's the next one for you?
All right, so we're jumping over now to my best recollection, Kyle. 9-year-old or maybe possibly 10-year-old Dagan. So we're talking about summer of 83 or summer of 84. I was excited to talk to you about this because I know you're a great lover of 80s music. This is Duran Duran's The Reflex.
Oh,
this one popped into my head maybe first. This is how much this song meant to me.
What a song.
Now, this track, for those of you who may not know, off their 1983 album, Seven and the Ragged Tiger, which I thought had more iconic songs on it, but songs like Rio and Hungry Like the Wolf came before.
Yeah, Rio's on Rio, and Hungry on the Wolf is on Rio.
Song. I love
Yeah.
that song. I love the album. I love the album art.
Oh yeah, the album art's. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff on there.
It's iconic.
Yeah, I agree.
That might be the iconic Duran Duran album, but we're going a year later, because Rio, I believe, was 82. And then songs that I really love, like Wild Boys, came later, like in 84, I believe. But Duran Duran, I want to talk about a little bit, but this is the first song, Kyle, that I remember getting really purely obsessed with, which is an interesting memory because I was already 9 or 10, but I can't think of a song before that I was so transfixed by. It's such a vivid memory for me. I would wait longingly for this song to play on the radio in the summer of 83 or 84. I forget which one. And I was either 9 or 10, as I said, and it was that tender age. Here's why. It was probably the last time in my life where I was really glued to the radio in order to hear something I liked, because by the time I was 9 or 10 at the time, it was just before, in a very 80s sense, that I would be of the age to get my first boombox, nice boombox with a dual cassette, or the nice stereo, so I could then go out and purchase my own music on vinyl or cassette and listen to what I want and when I want. This was right before that. And there was a very clear line of demarcation. This is probably like a year or maybe a year and a half before I got my first boombox, which was like this kind of fancy-ish boombox with detachable speakers that I thought was so cool. But the speakers could only go like 3 feet on each side. But I felt like it was almost like a boombox, but it felt like a little like a stereo. So I felt like hot shit. But the first radios that we probably got at that age, my generation, Gen Xers, are probably our clock radios, right? That was probably the first thing, which usually weren't fancy enough to have a cassette deck. They were just like, you would tune the radio. They would be pretty poorly, even the radio reception wasn't that great on them. But I specifically remember this song, like waiting for it to come on the radio and finding it so catchy and cool. And, it would be like the music and the soundtrack to car rides back and forth to Little League or journeying out to grandma's for Sunday dinner. And I remember, this is a very specific memory that I have. And Dana may remember this too, because she might have been there with me. I'm sure guys like John and my friend Tommy were there with me. We would take a dip in our pools in the summertime, and then we would lay out on our towels on the driveway, on the hot driveway, and just bake in the sun. And I didn't have my own boombox, but what I did have was Dad's like crappy old 70s boombox that he kept in the garage to listen to music when he was doing his woodworking and stuff. And it was like really crusty, but it did have a tape deck and it did have a decent tuner, so I could get whatever it was, WPLJ or WLI, what was it, WBLI, the top 40 stations. And the radio was so crusty. It was covered in sawdust. It was old, but I would just have that radio in the driveway while we were laying in the sun, getting, trying to warm back up to go for another dip in the pool. And when the reflex would come on, I would get so excited. Like that was the sole reason for having that radio in the driveway. I would wait for that song. And I think in all fairness, that song went to the top of the charts and it was really popular. So it would be the type of thing, radio was so important in the 80s, man. Like if a song was popular and they wanted people to tune in, they wanted ears, right? They wanted their listenership. They would play that song every 6 songs. So you could assume that song was going to be on every hour and a half while it was at the height of its popularity. And I would just be there. I was so down for this song. Like it was the first song that I was like, I got to hear that song. And it's interesting that Mom and Dad didn't even like buy it for us on vinyl or cassette or something just to play on their stereo, because it was a type of thing where it would have been so cool. Like that would have been an amazing Christmas present. But I don't even think they were thinking like that. They were just thinking like they don't have their own source of listening to music yet, so I'm not going to buy them their own cassettes or their own albums because it's not time yet. Then the boombox era probably kicked in with the whole breakdancing thing. That's what made it large. Right. You had Beach Street and all that kind of stuff. And then the movies came out, and then sort of breakdancing culture crossed into the suburbs. And then the boombox thing got on our, the average suburban kid's radar. And then it took off from there, and then buying our own music, going to Sam Goody, going to the mall to get that that cassette. I remember my first cassette was a Shaka Khan cassette, but that would come like probably in 84 and 85. So this was kind of a really specific time period where the radio was so important. And, of course, I listened to all these songs. I was listening to The Reflex and some other Duran Duran joints yesterday. And they're so, like, they are an 80s band that, for me, have really withstood the test of time. I think about them almost in the same breath as, like, a Prince, Genesis, Madonna. Like, their music really, it's kind of proof positive that it was good music. It wasn't just good 80s music. For me, like a lot of that stuff, Duran Duran was just a really good band. They made proper tunes,
Oh yeah, Duran
really
Duran
catchy
rules,
stuff.
I love
And
Duran Duran.
it was even hard to pick a Duran Duran song because I like a lot of theirs, but this was the iconic one for me. That was, and you know what? I will say, a lot of Duran Duran songs hold up better than this. The Reflex isn't a bad song, but it has a very dancey feel to it that seems very trendy, where a lot of other Duran Duran joints just seem a little more infinitely better. They seem infinitely better. They seem to have a more eternal quality than very specific 1983 sound. But I could see why I dug it. It starts off with like the female instrumental doing their little bebop thing, and then here comes Simon with his vocals. I think he was such a good singer. He had such a distinctive voice. So, and I'm happy to talk about Duran Duran because they were important to me as a kid, man. They were really like, even with Dana with her Tiger Beat magazines, and here's John Taylor on the cover, Heartthrob. Like, I couldn't get mad at that. I couldn't even tease her for that because I was down for Duran Duran too. It was like something we could all agree on.
Yeah, Duran Duran, I think is timeless new wave and 80s rock and synth. It's just, they're good, and they went through a few phases. They released that record in 1993. That's like a totally iconic.
Oh, I read about
too.
that, but I don't know if I heard it.
Where they sound totally different, and I love that record. That's where there are a few. Hold on, I actually want to look this up in real time here because there are a few songs on that record that are amazing.
What is Ordinary World
Come
from?
Undone and Ordinary World are both on that record.
That's on that album. Okay,
Yeah,
that's a great song and a great music video as well.
That's the self-titled record. Yeah, so I recommend that album too. But that's a good pull.
That was 93.
Yeah,
holy shit.
Like where
they stuck around a while.
Yeah, they did, and I think they, to your point, I think because I like Duran Duran throughout that entire period, really, but they do hone in on the sound of the time, and it actually gives them a really, really eclectic discography, in my opinion. All right, the second song I wanted to bring up is a Bad Religion song called Epiphany. Oh. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Bad Religion at all. They've been around for 40 years, I think. Punk rock band, iconic punk rock band. But back when I used to use, well, now I use Spotify, of course. But back when you used to use kind of more online radio stuff like Pandora, I used to get all of these different recommendations. You'd go to a certain radio, right? So it'd be like, Sublime Radio or whatever. And then you get all the bands that sound like Sublime and so on. Maybe you get a Sublime song every once in a while. And so on one of those various channels, this song by Bad Religion came up called Epiphany. And I encountered the song. I remember I was at IGN. I still have the list because I used to keep these like really neat lists of all the songs that I was like discovering, so I can one day maybe buy them or something like that. This was before you had like streaming where you could stream on demand. You might be able to find these songs on YouTube or whatever, but this was before Spotify really changed the game. So this was one of probably hundreds of songs that I encountered during this time where I was like, holy shit, this is a great song. And it never made me want to really go and investigate Bad Religion further. And I don't know why that is, but nonetheless, the song Epiphany, highly recommended. And what I recommend about it, it comes from the album The Process of Belief, which is from 2002. And the song is about, in my opinion, and again, the song is about how there is nothing, it's about oblivion, I guess, about death and understanding, I think, in a deep way, at least inside some of us, and certainly inside of me, it's not a hopelessness or a despair. It's like this acceptance that there's nothing to it. And he says in the beginning, a new age of reason, brain treason to trick the mind. What good is searching if nothing's there to find? And I really like this idea of banging your head against the wall to find some meaning or discovery and never coming and finding it at the end. He says, "Come forth, bear witness, see the profit from your loss, beg for forgiveness only after you tally the cost." We arrive at this place of no return, my sisters, only to discover that our values ran us aground of the shore in the sea of what we could be. So it seems to me that he's saying, spend your time wisely, be in the present, and these philosophical ideas that are fun to pine away about are unanswerable and might even have disappointing or dark answers if you even found what it meant at all. And I remember very well discovering the song and it remaining in my regular playlist to this day. Like whenever it comes up, I'm like, oh, so you skip songs sometimes when they come up on this mega playlist I have, this gargantuan playlist. And this is one of those songs I just don't skip. And it's always really spoken to me. And for some reason, religion and philosophy have a very inherently nostalgic feel for me because I've gone through so many trials and tribulations in my life, discovering and undiscovering and rediscovering and finding new angles and avenues of things in my own faith or lack thereof. And it was a relevant part of our upbringing and also a relevant part of my adulthood as I kind of tried to discover and almost wanted to discover. And I think that the interesting thing about Epiphany is this notion of wanting to find, of seeking it because you feel like the answer is there, but I don't think it really is. He says, if it's real for me, do I have to prove it to you? Why do revelations fade to cold blue untruths? It's oh so relative, subservient and total to one's perspective. It's true, in my opinion, in my experience. So in a deep way, this reminds me of those days where I kind of started to grapple with, as an adult, my lack of faith and found some song that I felt like spoke to it, not in a disrespectful way. Bad Religion, I know, has often been looked at in that punk rock, skate rock era that it came from, and being highly unorthodox, anti-establishment, anti-religion, all of those kinds of things. It's in the name. I mean, that's how I've always interpreted it. But I don't mean it that way, and I don't think it's meant that way either. I don't think so either. I highly recommend this song.
This is a Bad Religion song that I don't know. I know. So I'm excited to go listen to it. They're so interesting because they take me back to being 13. Once you start skateboarding, 1987 it was for me. Once I jumped on that skateboard and the music just came with it, especially the older kids that sort of introduced me or kind of brought me along with skateboarding. Bad Religion, Dead Kennedys, Fugazi, Black Flag, Sex Pistols, the Ramones, all of that stuff. So it was always, even though I never really got into skate rock or punk rock, it was always a soundtrack for me in the older kids' cars and the backgrounds and skate videos. So it always really took a place of prominence, even though I didn't necessarily listen to it. But I appreciate it now retroactively so much. And Helene, when I met Helene, she had a Bad Religion bumper sticker. Like she was really into this type of music as a young kid too. So this is one I'm interested in listening to. And Bad Religion sort of ascended to the top for me later on in being introduced to them. They have a very specific sound. And I think they have often talked about the fact that, they have things to say about religion. I mean, the band was kind of formed off of that, but that it wasn't necessarily this anti-religious thing. It was just sort of like their own take on religion and the way that they saw the world, which I always found I can't speak to it too intellectually because I don't know them that well, but I always was fascinated with that. And apparently very articulate in speaking about it too. Like they would really try to make a case for themselves and present it intelligently and not afraid to step up to the plate and say, this is what we meant by this. And also to have that substance behind the music. I think that's what makes it sort of timeless in a way, that they had that and their very own personal sound, but also their very own personal take on things, religion, politics, and so forth.
Sure.
So that's a good one, C. I like that one.
Thank you. So what's number 3 for you?
So this is one that kind of cracked me up and I was interested in sharing this one with you guys. So we're gonna hop to a whole different genre. Gonna hop over to rap music, hip hop.
Nice.
With Public Enemy and 15-year-old Dagan. Now, this is the track, Kyle. Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos from the album, 1988 album. I didn't realize it was that late. It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. Legendary album. My introduction to Public Enemy was actually this album. And it's interesting, man. Like, I think about this album, I think about the tracks on this album, specifically the one I'm going to talk about right now. And it was kind of my intro to another form of music and expression, coming out of the rock that I grew up in the background of my house, coming out of loving top 40 as a kid, and even like earlier R&B, stepping into another realm with militant, angry black music, really, and music with a message, and music that was really saying something profound and that I was always drawn to. And, now talk about 15-year-old Dagan, right? I'm 95 pounds soaking wet. I've been skateboarding for a year or so. I got the corniest gear, no color coordination, just as garish as possible, right? I got my paint splattered Chuck Taylors and ridiculous shorts and my bad boy club painter's cap with the bill flipped up and just some kind of goofy Vision streetwear shirt. And I'm rocking this Public Enemy album. On its face, it makes completely no sense. Why was I drawn to it? Why did I love it so much? Why did the meaning behind the music mean so much to me? It's actually funny to think about those memories and also to think about what our family, especially the older people in the family's perception must have been. I'm, this little white kid from the suburbs, let's be honest. But it always fascinated me, and it always really struck a chord with me. And even though it's funny to think back, I'm no different today. Like, that's just the person that I am. Like, the racial issues and racial injustice and all that kind of stuff really just ignites a fire in me. It just speaks to who I am. It just speaks to the very fabric woven in me. I don't know what it is. I can't even articulate it. We've talked about it on the show before. But this was really Chuck D and Flava Flav and Terminator X, and this album really was my introduction to that, if I think about it. Now, there were other things going on in rap music with KRS-One and Boogie Down Productions and some other entities that were instrumental in this whole movement of rap music that later came on and sort of evolved to the West Coast stuff that we would know with NWA and the DOC and Dr. Dre and everything like that. But this was really a very East Coast based sort of form of hip hop that was a little more militant, a little more angry. Public Enemy is also from Long Island, which is always something that's very important for me to remember. And I just remember, I have a very funny memory. Now, this was the summer of '88 because the album came out in June of '88. So I must have had this late in the summer. And I took a trip with Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Joni to visit our family in Nashua, New Hampshire. So Grandma's cousin Anna, who we just called Cousin Anna, lived in Nashua, and the family would go up to the White Mountains and visit them. And they lived in a very rural pocket, Cousin Anna and her husband Gene. It was really beautiful, picturesque, beautiful ponds and lakes and nice fishing. Aunt Joni really enjoyed that aspect of it. And then you had, nearby to Nashua, you had all the shopping outlets. So all the stores had their outlets, their discount outlets, giant shopping outlet malls. And so we would visit I went up there with Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Joni for a week. And this was what I was playing. I had the cassette. I had already kind of moved on to buying my own music. I had my little boom box in my room and I was buying my cassette. And this was one of the cassettes I wore out, one of my early cassettes. And I brought it along with me on the trip. And Aunt Joni humored me. And I would play this in the car with her. And she wasn't, although Aunt Joni was kind of my proxy to urban New York, because she's the one who used to bring me to Met games. She's the one who her longtime boyfriend lived in Astoria or Jackson Heights in Queens. So she would bring me into there, and I got a taste of what the city felt like. Now, Grandpa also had a shop. He had his hair salon in New York, and he brought me into Manhattan. But Aunt Joni was a big part of that, introducing me to urban New York as well. And although she was really into disco when she was young, but she didn't really like rap music, but she humored me. She let me play this. And it wasn't just rap. I mean, this is angry white, angry black music. And I remember her just listening to it, maybe chuckling and letting me play it in the car, and I would bump it with the windows down. And it was such a great memory and such a goofy, I must have looked so goofy, but really the music meant something to me. And let me just do a little karaoke here for you, Kyle.
Please.
The lyrics. This is how Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos starts. Now, to paint a picture, for those of you who don't know what the song is, the whole song basically tells the story about Chuck D being in prison, and he's incarcerated by this contingent of white racists, including the guards and the warden and everything. And it's the plan, the music, the story tells the plan of how they're violently going to break him out of jail. That's what this whole song's about. Starts, I got a letter from the government the other day. I opened and read it. It said they were suckers. They wanted me for their army or whatever. Picture me giving a damn. I said never. Right? This is 15-year-old Dagan bumping this. Now, also, let me set the scene for you, too. I was really into Public Enemy. They were right up there with De La Soul, which is the exact extreme opposite of the spectrum in rap music and hip hop music, right? But I already had the Public Enemy t-shirt. I had a massive Public Enemy logo that I drew and painted on the outside of my bedroom door. And it's also important to remember, back then, we really thought that logo was supposed to be a cop in a gun sight. Now, it later turned out that wasn't the thing. It's actually supposed to be a b-boy in the gun sight. So it means the opposite thing. Like that's a black man supposedly in the sights of a cop's gun. But we thought the opposite.
Right.
And I was down for that. And I remember Dad being like, come on, man, like, really? But I still wore it to school. I still had that on my bedroom door, huge, as big as the door. And it's such a funny memory for me because it was one of my earliest introductions that kindled my passion for rap music. And then also like really kindled the spirit of taking exception to basically to racism and how much that became a part of me, how much that became a part of my life. And I think maybe it tied in with some earlier stuff that we learned in school with the Civil War and the Underground Railroad and figures like Martin Luther King later on and figures like Harriet Tubman and Black heroes and all that kind of stuff. But I think this was the next step forward. Like this was the next iteration for me and made it feel tangible and real because it was contemporary and how much that stuff always meant to me, not just the entertainment value in the music, which I always loved, and the writing, which I always loved, but just what was behind the music. And even though it's kind of a comedic memory, and poor Aunt Joni, right, and poor Grandma and Grandpa, I think that why I got away with that was we took 2 cars up to New Hampshire from Long Island. So I was just with Aunt Joni, so we could kind of have fun and do that. But if I was with Grandma and Grandpa, I wouldn't be able to play that.
Yeah, of course not.
That tape
in
the car,
Sure.
So that was a very specific late 80s, mid-teens, early hip hop, early rap music memory for me. And kind of cool that Chuck D is still around. He's still relevant, still very articulate, still doing great music. Same with Flava. And, Public Enemy, very important band for me.
I'm just making sure I have the date right here. Yeah, I do. So the third song I wanted to bring up for my list here is a song by a man called Washed Out, Ernest Green Jr. is his real name, but he goes by Washed Out. And it's a song that I really love called Feel It All Around. Now, the thing I was looking up was when I discovered this, I wanted to make sure I had the right date, and I do. This is the theme song to the show Portlandia, which I love. I love that show. That show is hysterical. And I had never seen it before. So in 2011, it was on, and I was living in San Francisco with Greg, and I remember very clearly hearing this song. I was like at the kitchen table, and I'm like, what is that song? It's an amazing song. And I had thought at first, I'm like, that's a song that someone raps over. I want to know what song it was. And then I was surprised to discover, no, it's an original song by this kind of synthy songwriter guy. And I fell in love with it. And there are 2 things about this song that bring me back to that time. San Francisco, overcast, fall and winter of 2011 into 2012. This is a memorable time for me because this is around when Vita came out and really getting a lot of head of steam as a professional, but with Podcast Beyond and all of those things, IGN PlayStation, which I was leading at that point, but also because, and I brought about this topic in the past, is that when I broke up for a year with my girlfriend, who I ended up dating in 2 different waves, you want to say, the first time we broke up in 2011, she broke up with me, and I had this real feeling of acceptance, as I've described, going home on the BART to the train, to the T, or not the T, I'm not in Boston, to the Muni, and feeling this real acceptance of what is next, this excitement about the unknown and being out on your own. And this song came around that same time and ended up becoming part of that feeling for me. I think the song feels that way. I think the song feels freeing. It's heady, shoegazy in some way. And there's only really a couple lines in the song, and it encapsulates what I was feeling at the time. It says, you feel it all around yourself. You know it's yours and no one else. You feel the thought of love again. It's all right. In spite of all the things you did, we'll work it out. That's it. Those are the lyrics. And he says it like a few times. And I just felt that in my own mind, like regardless of what he meant when he was writing. And it felt to me, I interpreted it as like it's almost like myself speaking to myself and understanding that things end and things begin, to embrace the change and to embrace the unknown. And that's very unlike me. And that 2011 and 2012 period is very memorable in my life because that was one that really was unorthodox and strange for me in the way I didn't do anything wrong or anything, but just in the way I comported myself. I was dating different girls, and I was going out a lot, and I was spending money, and I was doing, it was a very strange time, but this song still makes me feel, even though that none of that added up to anything, the song still brings me back and reminds me of that freeing era. And it reminds me of seeing Portlandia for the first time and how hysterical I thought that show was. And I had skin cancer, as people might remember if you're with me a long time ago.
I always forget that.
Yeah. I have scars on my nose. And so my nose was all cut up and I was all bandaged up when I first saw it, and I was fucking cracking up, and you could feel the stitches like starting to tear themselves apart as I was laughing. And I'm like, I can't watch this right now. And I remember that so well. It was right before New Year's and going from 2011 to 2012. So a very, very memorable scenario for me, represented by a song that I think is very accessible. And I think, first of all, if you like Portlandia or have seen it, you're familiar with the song. But if not, it's a really listenable, chill wave type joint, and will always remind me of San Francisco, will always remind me of that IGN era, and will always remind me of that single. I've been single in my adult life in waves, and that specific era where things felt all right, as he says, we'll work it out. Like, it felt, that's so unlike Colin, I'll never forget that. I don't know what I was even thinking, but it happened. So Dig, what's number 4 for you on your list?
I have to watch Portlandia. I've seen very little of that show.
You'd love that show.
That's really a great one for me to watch. That's something new. I'm always thinking, like, what can I go back and watch that I missed? Having covered a lot of ground with KnockBack, fortunately, but that's a great one. And also, I was wondering if we would get some media in there, like would we get a theme song in there? Because I don't have one.
Yeah, Portlandia is kind
of cool.
Yeah, Portlandia is good, and just total non sequitur. But I've been watching your favorite, or one of your favorites, Trailer Park Boys, as I'm now in the 5th season, and it's just so funny.
I binged the hell out of that show last year.
I sent you the one with, I saw the episode with Conky the doll, and I was like dying. I was like absolutely dying. I couldn't even believe it.
It's so good. Like, I feel like there's not enough appreciation. We'll get to Trailer Park.
Definitely. We'll go there.
There's a lot to cover, a lot of ground to cover.
Dig, song 4 for you.
All right, so let's skip ahead only a year or so to 16-year-old Dagan. This is definitely a band I've spoken, or a group, a musical group that I've spoken to in the past, but I had to put it in here because this memory is so profound for me. And that's the Supremes' 1967 song called Reflections. If I remember correctly, I think they do use this song as a theme song, actually, interestingly enough, for that show China Beach, which I've never seen. But I've only ever heard that because I love this album so much, and I love this specific track so much. Now, I first heard this, to my best recollection, it was 89 or 90. And I first heard it off of a sort of an album that was a compilation of various Supremes tracks over the years. Which, here's the story behind that. Now, our Aunt Joni, who's still one of my great friends in life, our mom's younger sister, of course, she, in the column, was a little kid, but in the late 80s to maybe it was 1990. I should have asked her because I just saw her 2 days ago. But Aunt Joni decided that she was going to move from Long Island to Hawaii. And she just wanted a change of scenery. I think she had already been there for vacation with grandma and grandpa. She kind of fell in love with it and she wanted to live somewhere new and go on an adventure and try something. So she put this big plan together to move from Long Island to Hawaii. And it was a big thing. It was a big thing in our family. I remember seeing her off at the airport, and it was an emotional thing, but we were also excited and happy for her. I guess in the back of our heads too, we thought like, this is proof positive that we're definitely going to visit Hawaii. So this is kind of awesome.
Right.
And she stayed for a few years. She didn't stay long. She ended up coming back. But what happened with me is I was very close to Aunt Joni, and she had her prized stereo. It was either a Pioneer or a Kenwood, but this was like a badass stereo, complete with like glass cabinet, big, beautiful speakers, a graphic equalizer, turntable, dual cassette. Like this was a monster, right? It was beautiful. And of course, I had this small little boombox with the detachable speakers. I thought that was badass, but now this was going to replace that. And she was like, "Yeah, I'm going to give this to you because I can't take it. I'm not going to take it to Hawaii. It's too much of a burden." So she gave me her stereo, which I was so excited about. And I remember having a place of honor in my bedroom in Brookhaven, and that's where I would bump all my albums. I was early into hip hop. I was buying hip hop on vinyl at that time, and I had all my cassettes. But the icing on the cake was that she accidentally left this cassette in the stereo in one of the tape decks, and it was this Supremes compilation. And I really wasn't familiar with the genre of music. I wasn't familiar with the Supremes necessarily. I wasn't familiar with Diana Ross or Motown. I think the most we got was like, listening to the Four Tops because it was so popular, or Kool and the Gang was on the top 40 charts or whatever growing up. But this was a really distinctive moment in my life because I realized that not only did I enjoy the Supremes proper and, looking at the liner notes in the cassette and everything like that, like falling a little bit in love with like 19-year-old Diana Ross, which I had a little bit of a crush on
Sure.
at that time as a 16-year-old. But
No doubt.
I think what it did, Kyle, was it turned my ear to music with female vocalists. It was the first time I was like, oh, this is a thing, like it speaks to me a little more, or it spoke to me a little more when a female was singing, whether it's that sort of attraction, being a straight male, I don't know, but something that really resonated and sort of brought me around to being attracted to music with female vocals. And I remember shortly thereafter is when I found the Sundays and Sonic Youth and MC Light and the Breeders and Heart. So and I remember like going out and buying a Heart album on vinyl. I think John did too. Like it was just something that really.
Heart rocks, dude.
Oh, it's so good. Oh, so some of my favorite music still is like classic Heart. But realizing like, oh, I really like this. Almost like finding hip hop a similar thing. It's like I really enjoy listening to music with female vocals. I find it even a notch above everything else. And I think it really started with the Supremes, which is really interesting in that it was just this little twist of fate because Aunt Joni accidentally left the Supremes album in her stereo cabinet. And this song in particular, I choose Reflections. There's so many Supreme songs that I love / Diana Ross songs because of course they had their problems and Diana Ross wasn't always involved and she went off on her own as well to do solo stuff. But I love Love Child, Up the Ladder to the Roof, Love Hangover. There's a lot of songs that are really among my favorite, but Reflections was special to me because I think it sounded a little psychedelic. There's a little psychedelic late 1960s things going on that was very flavor of the month, but I find it very distinctive, especially for a Supreme song. And I think responded to the melancholy of the song. It's a strange beast, this one, because it's relatively upbeat, actually, but there's a little bit of a bittersweet quality to it. It's catchy, but I also like that it's emotional and a little raw. The lyrics that she's singing about this unrequited love or this breakup or being wronged romantically, it's soulful. And I think it really was the track that turned me on to music that resonated on a soulful level, on an emotional level, even if it was kind of fun to listen to and catchy and upbeat. And it had that psychedelic thing that almost even sounded like a video game. I think I just took that whole thing and just blended it into like, I really enjoy this sound. And yeah, it's a great memory. And I do wonder, like, had that cassette not been in that stereo, who knows? You know, how would the music I really have come to love, including the Supremes, but not limited to the Supremes. I love female vocals. I love bands with female vocals. And also, you said it before, Kyle, just a couple of minutes ago, it has that shoegazy quality to it. And maybe the first song that really I could remember that you could apply that label to. It has a real shoegazy, ethereal sound to it that I just fell in love with.
Yeah, that's good
and
stuff.
I still love. My musical tastes really haven't changed. So yeah, number 4, the Supremes, Diana Ross.
Good choice.
Did Diana Ross pass?
I don't know.
I have to look that up.
I'm gonna look for you.
I don't think she has.
I don't think so either. But
you wonder what a superstar.
77
like
years
that.
old. She's alive and well.
77?
Yep.
Oh, that's not okay. I thought she was even older than that. Unbelievable. But yeah, man, this was a really, really special one for me. And I wish I still had that cassette because it meant so much. Maybe the tactile bit of music from my past that means the most. You know, that one cassette just changed so much. It was such a taste maker for me, which is crazy.
I love that you brought up Heart too, because I just have a soft spot for them. I think that's a great band.
So
I was so glad I got to see them, which was cool when I lived in California years ago.
So
and
jealous.
Nancy Wilson, I is just one of my crushes, like the guitarist.
Oh my God.
Like she's incredible. Back when you watch those videos, I mean, she's an old woman now, no offense to her, but even if you watch her 10 or 15 years ago, I'm like, oh my God, this woman is like, it's so hot. Like she's this beautiful woman who's thrashing a guitar, right? It's
so
there's something,
talented.
yeah, it's something about that. Like that's hot in its own way. Like I think there's hot musicianship is hot in its different ways when people play instruments, both men and women. Like I think it's sexy to people. And when you have a woman playing a guitar, then it becomes hot in different ways.
Absolutely.
And then, yeah, and she's hot in a specific way. So, love Heart. Great band. Song 4 for me is Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears. Now, Tears for Fears is one of my very favorite bands, and Songs from the Big Chair, their 1985 record, is one of my very favorite albums. And you really can't go wrong on that record. Actually, when Ramon was here a month or two ago and we were hanging out, he's like, let's put on Songs from the Big Chair. And I'm like, all right. You know, and there's just such wonderful songs, starting out with Shout, of course. And there's Head Over Heels on there. But this particular song, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, reminds me of a time and place in my life, specifically the fall of 2006 into the spring of 2007. That was my last year at Northeastern as a senior. And I had a really bad breakup with my girlfriend at the time. And she like left me for some other dude, and it was like this really hairy situation that, like, in thinking back, I'm like, man, that was really unfortunate. What was going on with you? What were you thinking? But that was where I was, and I always retreated into music, and I always liked Tears for Fears, but I was getting really into them in college and kept listening to their records. And Everybody Wants to Rule the World was a song that spoke to me at a very specific time, and it's one of those things where I don't know what their intention was. But it starts out with a welcome to your life. There's no turning back. I love that line. And it's true. It kind of made me feel strong at a time where I needed the strength to confront certain things. And the chorus is, help me make the most of freedom and of pleasure. Nothing ever lasts forever. Everybody wants to rule the world. It's a great line. And I remember watching the video and being kind of confused by it and just letting it wash over me. And it kind of became my anthem during that last semester or so. And while I don't know what other people might take away from it, it really did provide needed strength and clarity at a time where I needed it as a young person the most. And it's one of those experiences I try to remind people. A lot of people write in, not a lot of people, but I talk to a ton of people on Patreon that write in about all sorts of random things. We have private conversations, and a lot of people talk about breakups and marriages ending and all of those kinds of things. And can't speak so much to the marriage thing, but when I'm speaking to a younger person that's breaking up with someone, I think back to these experiences and I'm like, man, there's so much ahead of you that you'll need something like a song to remind you of that time, because you won't even really remember living it. That's how crazy it is, and how much that pain is encapsulated in that moment, and you can't even remember what you're upset about after that. So this song reminds me of that, and I had to give it a shout out because it's such a wonderful song and it's such a great record, but it's also a song that again gave me clarity at a really weird, cloudy time in my life. And it's not easy to be 21 or 22 years old. It's a pretty rough year.
That's a rough
couple
age.
years. And I would say 16 to 25 is pretty rough overall.
Agreed.
And it's just one of those trials and tribulations. Now that I'm 37, I look back on these things and I'm like, oh my God, I really am one of the adults where I don't care if I'm embarrassing myself. I don't care what people think. I'm like out there. Kids are playing. I'm out there like sweeping the sidewalk and doing my thing. Like, nothing to be embarrassed about yet. Things were so different when I was young, and the things that hurt me now, I should have been hurt by the situation. It was a horrible situation, but I went into a dark place that I don't think I would revisit until 2019 when I really was in that dark place. So maybe it bookends that as well. But I had to give a shout out to my beloved Tears for Fears with Everybody Wants to Rule the World.
That's awesome, dude. I'm not surprised to see them pop up for you. What a great band. Isn't it crazy how song could have this, music could have this healing quality? It's kind of neat. And they were one of the great 80s bands. I mean, I have to tell you, man, I think my favorite Tears track is Sowing the Seeds of Love.
Oh, that's a great song.
Oh my God, I love that song.
That's from the
I mean, that might be
after,
my top 50. That might be in my top 50 tracks all time. Like, that's how good that song is. So good. But that, I mean, like, that's an iconic one. And then Shout, which you brought up too. I mean, those were, you can't have a proper 80s soundtrack without including Tears for Fears. Those guys, so talented. And they wrote all their own music too, right?
Oh yeah, Roland Archibald,
they were really like
Kurt Smith. Those guys are
craftsmen.
Yeah, I mean, they're awesome. But time to eat all your words, swallow your pride, open your eyes, as they say in Sowing the Seeds of Love. I love that bridge where Kurt Smith comes in. He doesn't sing the whole song, and then he sings just, so and then he just kind of comes in with his stuff. Like, time to eat all your words.
Yeah, they had tunes, but the substance.
That's what I love about listening to them too. Is like who's going to sing and where's going to, where are they going to come in and stuff. There, because it's really just those two guys. I mean, mostly, So
yeah, and they're weird because they have a very accessible quality to the music. It feels top 40, but there's a lot of substance behind it. It's sort of like coming out of the era of Pink Floyd, and Pink Floyd was still doing great music in the 80s.
Okay.
But carrying on that tradition of having the tunes coupled with the substantive lyrics, the well-written, you know what I mean? Like there's not a lot of bands that did that. I'm realizing more and more that Prince really did that more than I ever imagined because he was such a character and he was such a physical entity that I think as a kid you overlooked that. But now I listen to like Raspberry Beret. I'm like, holy shit, that song's fucking amazing. On every level, it's amazing. It's another conversation, but you realize that when you get older, music starts to take on different dimensions.
Oh, definitely. I've become the older I get, the more of a Prince fan I become.
Oh my God.
I just heard Let's Go Crazy. I mean, that's a big song. That's a song, but I was like, that song is fucking awesome. Because I don't often listen to that song, and I added it to my playlist. I'm like, that's a jam. I mean, I talked to Allie recently where there are certain bands where I wish I got to see them in their moment. Actually, it's funny because we're talking about Devo. I was like, damn, I wish I saw Devo in like 1982. I would have went off.
Great conversation.
But Prince, I was talking about seeing him during the Purple Rain era with the Revolution and stuff. I would have shit. They would have been. Can you imagine the stagecraft and like how amazing that show must have been?
What a performer! Yeah. But the music behind it he wasn't just that. That's why we're still talking about that dude. Like, oh my God, he's a next level genius, and we already realized that. But no, it's the next level. It's like
it almost feels like maybe it's just me becoming I've been into music my whole life. Like I really feel like it wasn't until Prince died that people really truly understood.
I think that's absolutely true. I think you're right.
And I think it's because we were robbed of like probably another 10 or 20 years of potential. It's too bad. It's why I'm glad people like Elton John are going away before they die, right? Where it's like it's a farewell tour. At least you know what you're getting into. Where Billy Joel tried to do the same thing. I think he's still playing, but I'm glad I got to see Elton John before. I got to see Elton John. I mean, that was awesome before that all went down. I saw him at Caesar's Palace with like 1,000 people. I mean, that's a small ass venue.
That's insane. That's Elton John.
Dude, and
you'll always be able to talk about that.
I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is Elton John's playing like in this small ass venue every day.
So cool.
If I were an Elton John fan, I'd be like, I'd live at Caesar's Palace. It was like $50 to see him,
It
But
speaks to him too, the quality of a person he seems to be. That you don't need to, you know what I mean? How much money does he need? How many arenas does he need to fill? He's filthy rich many millions of times over. So it's like to do just for the love of the music and just because that's what he loves to do. So
cool, man.
cool.
Well, let's go into that song number 5, last but not least, unless it is.
Yeah, this is a good one for me. This is really one of the songs, maybe even more so than my other 4, that really takes me back to a very specific time and place. Very nostalgic. I could taste the air. I could smell what it smells like. I could feel what it feels like. And 19-year-old Dagan, my last year on Long Island, actually. Souls of Mischief, 93 Till Infinity. Still one of my favorite rap songs, hip hop songs of all time. Off of their 1993 album, also titled 93 Till Infinity, their debut studio album. Yeah, man, where do I start with this? I mean, Souls of Mischief was really important to us. It was really, you think about hip hop music back then, right? You had a very distinctive sect of East Coast hip hop. And in New York, we had DJ Red Alert and Funkmaster Flex. We had the New York radio stations, a very rich hip hop scene. Independent or underground hip hop was just starting to come in, so that wasn't really a thing just yet. And then our West Coast flavored hip hop was very SoCal centric. It was very of LA. So we had NWA and DOC, Dre, Snoop Dogg. West Coast rap was very distinctive. And then, of course, East Coast was taking off with Jay-Z and Biggie and all the other things. And then we had the native tongue, if you liked Tribe, if you liked De La. There was all EPMD, KRS, Public Enemy. It was such a rich tapestry of hip-hop and everything that came out of, especially in New York and the East Coast, whether it was Brand Nubian or Big Daddy Kane or Kool Mo D, LL Cool J. Like, we had, those were the forefathers, those were the uncles, and then hip hop was springing out of that. So everybody had their own distinct sort of portion and role to play in hip hop. And then all of a sudden, in the early to mid 90s, this other West Coast hip hop started to come out, which was a Northern California thing, which was not on our radar at all. And that was, included the Hieroglyphics crew, which consisted of very much like an East Coast native tongue with Jungle Brothers and Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul. Hieroglyphics was Souls of Mischief, Del the Homo Sapien, who's still on the scene. Del's very distinctive, awesome, also part of the Gorillas. And Casual. So we had this, and they had a very distinctive sound. I loved the sort of Oakland-based, San Francisco, Northern California-based hip-hop because it was very distinctive. It was a little bit of East Coast mixed with their own flavor. And so now you had this whole other thing of now you had East Coast hip-hop, West Coast, which was like SoCal, West Coast stuff. And then you had this new thing coming out of Northern California, and it just caught on really quick. It became really tied in with skateboarding. So back then, the 411 videos that came out monthly or bi-monthly and just skate culture in general really caught on to the Northern California hip hop really quick. And it had a very distinctive atmosphere to it. It was nostalgic. It was fun, but it also like went a little deeper with talking about stuff. And I had a little bit of a battle rap East Coast element to it, braggadocious and all that, but it had a little something extra. It had a little extra flavor. It talked about a day in the life, much like Souls of Mischief always reminded me of like a West Coast Tribe Called Quest. That's what they always reminded me of. And this track just takes me back to, that last year of 93 and into 94, my last year on Long Island before leaving for college. I already graduated in the summer of 92. And this was kind of my year to just kind of shuffle off responsibility. It was all about hanging out with PJ, hanging out with the people I skated with, my long-term girlfriend at the time, hanging out at the skate shop, fast food, raver chicks. Like it was all about just like having fun. I had to work my little shifts at the supermarket, get that done as quick as possible, and just have a good time. Video games at night, hitting the arcade, Street Fighter, Samurai Showdown, Mortal Kombat. This song is really the theme song, is the track behind all that, popping it in the cassette deck and playing it in the car while we went out east to the skate park, which was really far away in Southold on Eastern Long Island, which is far from where we were. And that was like one of our haunts. And just really like reminds me, like, even to this day, I'll pop this song in, Colin, like, it reminds me of the car smelling like French fries and grip tape. You know what I mean? It reminds me of like someone's cheap cologne that they dashed on because we just had an all day skate session, and then I was going to drop them off to go see their girlfriend, like, or go out to eat with the gang at like a Fridays or something. So it was like that very specific period of irresponsibility, just plain fun. Before, and I moved to Philly in February of '94. I started art school, and my early Philly experiences were fun, but this was a very distinctive atmosphere. I can remember winter and fall, just the way the trees looked, shooting down the Long Island Expressway to go, to a skate spot. We were kind of all over Long Island and into the city and into the boroughs at that point, and just having a great time. And it's funny because there's other albums that I could kind of draw up with this time period. Like I think of De La's third album, Balloon Mind State, very distinctive album of this period too. But based on the power and strength of a single song, a single track, it has to be Souls of Mischief 93 Till Infinity. And, I sort of adopted this as me and PJ's song too. My best friend, even though PJ and I met in 91, this seemed to be the song that just encapsulates our time together as teenagers coming into our 20s on Long Island, still going through the throes of like that Peter Pan, Neverland, Peter Pan syndrome thing of like, we're not going to do anything except skate and have a great time, hang out with girls, whatever. And this was kind of the last throes of that, and this album was always in the background, specifically this track. And I felt like I had to mention it to sum up the conversation for myself.
I was going to say this song, I'm glad you touched on PJ because that obviously reminds me of you and PJ. It's a great song. It's on my playlist. It comes up. And it has that there's something about 90s hip hop to me specifically that sounds extra nostalgic. Because I think a lot of 80s centric hip hop sounds a little rudimentary. And so it feels old. There's something,
that's a good point.
There's a Far Side song that, hold on, what song is it?
I'm so glad you brought them up because
they're
very much.
Running, the song Running by Far Side.
Great.
Just the way that song begins,
mm-hmm.
If you go listen to it, come on, yeah. It's album. Like, and like the scratching starts and you can tell they're in the studio raising the volume a little bit and the beat begins and so I'm like, this is a very goosebump worthy nostalgia song.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And they were bringing a different flavor. Those specific bands, Souls, Farside is a great one. Like they were bringing a really brand new flavor to hip hop. We had never heard anything like that before. It was a whole new iteration on this genre of music. And if you think back, I know for some of you younger cats, you don't really realize that, but think back to that time, it was only really one of two or three things. And then of course, later on, we got the Dirty South sort of genre that sort of compartmentalized that thing. But then, the Northern California thing was really special. And Farside's another conversation we have to have, at some point in the future when we talk about music.
All right, Dave. The final song, I actually changed this one up from what I told you I was going to do. I wanted to bring in a song. I have a lot of literal melancholy in this list, so I wanted to have some figurative melancholy.
Okay.
And I wanted to bring up the song Coheed and Cambria's "Welcome Home." Now, this song came to mind for me when I was scrolling through my music earlier because I'm not a Coheed and Cambria fan at all. In fact, I don't know very many of their songs. I didn't discover this song until 3 years after it came out, and it didn't spur me on to really look for more. But the reason that I discovered this song was because it was a huge part of the original Rock Band, which came out in 2007. And Rock Band, as you guys will know out there, was the second major and rival to the music genre alongside Guitar Hero. Now, obviously, we had DDR, we had all sorts of weird Drummania games, but this was really like mainstream stuff. And I had started working at IGN in 2007, and Rock Band and Guitar Hero were really, really, really taking root at this point. And we used to get together and play after work, and we would get played at people's houses, and we just got really into playing Rock Band. And 2007 and 2008 were really good times in my life. I was just moving to San Francisco. I was single. I was young. I had no money. I didn't know any better. I was out and about drinking and smoking and hanging out and meeting girls and going to work. Like you said, I worked a corporate job at IGM, but I would want, just be working so we can go and hang out that following night. And we were all like a brotherhood. And the reason I was saying that the melancholy is figurative is because it reminds me of a time before my unpersoning, let's say, when I had a larger group of friends who I really liked being around. And I have very, very specific memories of playing this song and watching people play this song and how much everyone loved it. There's a great refrain at the end of the song with all this chanting that's awesome. It's great in the regular song and it's cool in the Rock Band version. And reminds me of playing specifically at my friend Nate's house. He had like an HD projector in their living room. And it was huge and we all got to really enjoy it that way. And it reminds me of those early to mid 20s years in my life where things were pretty good and I had a decent social life and a good social circle around me. And it's funny because I just randomly, I don't know why, but on my YouTube, it recommended like an old Podcast Beyond episode. I think like episode 200 or 150 or something like that. And so I went and watched it, and it's just so funny watching me interact with people that don't like me anymore or whatever. It reminded me of that. And I guess that's kind of maybe why when I saw Coheed and Cambria, that was kind of on my mind. I'm like, oh, this song actually is drawn from a very specific moment. Because as I said, it's just not a band that really spoke to me and that I didn't care about this. It comes from this record with some absurd name, Good Apollo on Burning Star 4, Volume 1, From Fear Through the Eyes of Madness. It's like, all right, enough.
That's the title?
That's the title of the album. It's, prog rock or whatever, but it's too much for me. I wasn't into getting further into it. So this song really is a place and time thing. And I know that people that were around for the rock band when it was huge and when it was at its genesis will remember this song, because this was just one of those songs that you didn't have that many options. Later on, they would release songs every week, and before you knew, you had hundreds of songs and sequels and stuff. But at the time, it's like you had 30 or 25 or 50 songs, whatever it was, and so you started hearing the same shit over and over again, and you had to really find the ones that you liked. And so Welcome Home by Coheed and Cambria just reminds me of those games, reminds me of that era of my life, reminds me of friendship, and reminds me of all those kinds of things. So I had to end with that. I had a more melancholy choice for the last one, but we can do this episode again in the future. There's so many stories to tell about music. So yeah, that's it.
Cool, man. I don't know if I know this last track that you mentioned.
I think you probably will if you listen to it. Yeah, Welcome Home. I highly recommend it. It's a great song. Really epic prog rock song. But yeah, I think that out of all of the ones that I mentioned, I think that you'll enjoy the Head Automatica one the most.
Yes, I'm going to listen to that one first. I'll go in order, actually.
Okay, cool.
Listen to those today while I work.
Cool. I happen to know the songs that you recommended.
Yeah, you know all of them, huh?
With the exception of the Public Enemy one, which I probably have to just go look up.
When you hear it, you'll be like, oh yeah, this one. Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess I have that little bit of an advantage. But always good to talk music with you. I feel like we don't have to do anything, but we should do it more.
Yeah, it's fun.
I love music. You love music. And yeah, it is fun. Like there's so much to say. I really feel like I feel like the way we treat music, or the way we treat TV shows and movies, like we should be treating albums like that when we do a show. We should do a show about Sgt. Pepper. We should do a show about The Wall. We should do a show
great idea.
About whatever. So we'll get there. We'll start in 2022. I think we'll start incorporating music more. And I think this is a good reminder of why.
Yeah, I love the album idea. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, why not? I mean, why not?
Yeah, of course.
All right, Dig. Well, let's end every episode of KnockBack like we always do with a dad joke. I throw it over to you for that.
All right, my friend. I feel like we've done a lot of flying insect jokes for some reason, but let's do one more.
Sure.
Kyle,
yeah.
Where do wasps like to get lunch?
I don't know.
A bistro. So that's nursery school level.
Yeah, that's no.
But sometimes we gotta, make them a little less sophisticated. Right. I feel like we have to go in waves.
You can't set expectations that they're always going to be grand slams.
Next time we'll do a second grade joke.
Right, and we'll work our way back
better, a little more sophisticated for you guys.
Keep them wanting more. Very good. All right, Dave. Well, thank you for your time. And thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of KnockBack. Remember, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access to every episode of the show. That also goes for Defining Duke, our Xbox podcast, Sacred Symbols, our PlayStation podcast, and more. get your name in the credits, submit your inquiries for the various shows, topic ideas, and so on. We really appreciate your support over there. But of course, you can leave us nice reviews on iTunes, etc. Watch us on YouTube and subscribe there. That's basically it. We'll see you next time. Yeah, that's it. We'll see you next time for more KnockBack. Until then, goodbye.
Goodbye.
KnockBack, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. KnockBack's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including KnockBack, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.